The first 3 episodes of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, have been released. And somewhat predictably, it's not going well so far. From what I've heard from other YouTubers and commentators, pretty much every writing, continuity, lore, and characterization problem that existed in Season 1 continues to exist in Season 2. It's painful to watch, which is why I'm not bothering. But when I heard about one particular scene in the 3rd episode, well, I had to investigate, and I had to chime in. Because the question I'm asking today is, what the f*** have they done? There's a scene where an orc is pleading with Adar to not send them to war again. And they are safe and have a home. And then he goes off and hugs his orc wife and child. No, I'm not kidding. Dear Lord, what am I watching? Orcs care about having a home and being safe? And they have children with female orcs? By the way, officially, in canon, there are no female orcs. They're all male. The entire series has been an egregious vandalization of Tolkien's work. We've already discussed that at length. And much of the breaks from canon and Middle-earth lore that we've seen up until this point, they've been either mistakes or immensely stupid and illogical reinterpretations. But I think this one is probably the worst, because it's essentially a rewriting of Tolkien's moral philosophy. Because of his strong Christian faith, Tolkien believed in clear black and white distinctions between good and evil. None of this modern moral relativistic garbage that you get from writers who've lived their lives through a decadent age of comfort, who can have these naive and utopian ideas about the world and human motivations. Who's to say what's right and wrong? Tolkien lived through the First and Second World Wars. He fought in the Battle of the Somme. He'd seen some hard times, and those were life experiences he could draw on. It's therefore not surprising, given the hardships he endured, that he gained a valuable insight into the human condition, and he brought that to his work. He understood that evil is a real thing. Some people, psychopaths for example, genuinely wish to do harm to others. They aren't motivated by good intentions or some kind of misplaced sense of altruism. They would do harm even to their own families. We are told these days that seeing anything in black and white terms is close-minded and narrow and simple, that morals are more complicated and everything is shades of grey. Villains are the heroes of their own stories, and although some people are wrong, they're all basically good at heart and just doing what they perceive to be right in the moment. This is an immensely naive, childish, irresponsible, and dangerous way of thinking. Conventional wisdom has endured for centuries because it works, because it helps to maintain civilization itself. Children are told nursery rhymes and cautionary tales and stories in order to communicate deep and profound messages in simple terms, to prepare them for the dangers in the world, that not everyone can be trusted, that some people are bad and will do bad things to them if given the chance. Such allegories are designed to keep us safe. Why am I talking about this? Well, because orcs were depicted by Tolkien as men who'd succumb to evil, fallen elves who'd been corrupted by Melkor, who would later become Morgoth. They were all male, no females, and they were meant to be animal-like, savage, brutal, barbaric, cruel, and monstrous. All attributes of evil, no empathy, no love, certainly, and no compassion. And I think they were created because orcs prove that man can be corrupted, that corruption is real, that people can become bad. Christianity teaches us to avoid sinning and to ask God for forgiveness, because to be good and to do good can be difficult. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy. It's easier to become complacent and fall into moral bankruptcy. So Christianity, which was the backbone of Tolkien's work, it's about striving to maintain oneself on a narrow moral and spiritual path. That's the challenge for the human soul. It's an ongoing battle against the temptations of the devil. In Matthew 7:13 it says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." I think likewise George Lucas' portrayal of good and evil, light versus dark side in Star Wars, is a very important moral teaching that if you don't control the worst aspects of your emotions, if you give in to anger, fear, revenge, greed, and so forth, that you can fall out of balance with the Force, that you can fall into the dark side. And that's why the Force and the philosophy of the Jedi is so compelling and inspiring, and sadly, it's also the reason that it's been so utterly messed with recently in this woke era. In some recent Star Wars productions, like The Acolyte, there's all this relativistic messaging once again. Who's to say what's good and evil, right? You know, who's to say the Jedi are correct? The dark side is just a different path. It's such a hideous message for young people. And with the orcs, what we're seeing here is an attempt at making them a sympathetic race. You're supposed to have sympathy for them. They're trying to humanize them, despite the fact that they're supposed to be inhuman and just evil, nothing else. Now we're being given this nuance, this sophisticated take, supposedly, whereby the orcs are caring, family-oriented, who just want to live in peace and raise their kids. I guess the orcs are just misunderstood. The real problem is their cruel masters who send them off to war. I mean, what's next? The Borg on Star Trek don't want to conquer and assimilate the galaxy. They just want to live in peace to raise their Borg children. What makes the Borg so terrifying is their lack of every human quality that we value. They don't care about anything other than spreading themselves across the galaxy like a virus and transforming living creatures into soulless zombies, with no freedom and no personal autonomy. The pain, terror, suffering that they cause, that doesn't even compute for them. Their coldness is part of their terror. The orcs are not zombies, but they are certainly men without souls, without conscience, and therefore they don't have any guiding morality or principles. But what these Amazon writers have done with Rings of Power here is so egregious because it completely destroys the whole point of the Lord of the Rings story. There are people and races of people who have built civilizations of their own in this Middle Earth. Peaceful, prosperous. You've got the elves, you've got hobbits, dwarves, there's men. They've maintained their borders of Middle Earth. They've preserved their cultures and identities and traditions for centuries. They've had relative peace. And there's only ever problems on Middle Earth when external dark forces, evil forces, descend upon their worlds every few centuries. And it's only evil because it is the antithesis of everything these people of Middle Earth believe in and stand for. It is anti-life itself. In order to have the luxury of developing prosperity, values, beauty, high culture, tradition, and a way of life, you must first have safety and security. You have to have a border. It helps to have a strong military. But Sauron and his armies of orcs are a threat to all of that way of life because they threaten to destroy safety and security by force. The orcs are not civilized, nor can they be. They don't have culture, values, or a way of life. They're incapable of such ideals because they are the manifestation of evil and death. They are destruction, but make no mistake, they are not a force of nature like an earthquake or a volcano. They are intentionally destructive with a will to cause suffering and death. It seems as though the writers cannot grapple with this. That's why this Rings of Power show is so awful. But I think what makes this so much worse, in my opinion, is that it appears as though the writers believe that they have exceeded Tolkien in this regard, as though they believe they have developed a more evolved and sophisticated moral understanding. Nothing could be further from the truth. I lack the words to fully articulate how irredeemable and horrendous shows like Rings of Power or The Acolyte truly are. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe for more, hit that like button, and share this video. Take care, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.